Tonight's program is entitled Black Pirates of the Caribbean. Somebody like to say the Black Pirates of the Caribbean, but I like to use the word Caribbean. And as a kid growing up, I was a avid TV watcher. Actually, as an old man, I'm still an avid TV watcher. I've been watching TV since 1957, so that's a while. Anyway, I've watched many movies about pirates, swashbuckling heroes swinging on ropes, jumping on ships with their cutlasses or their swords, cannons blaring, and they're taking ships over from different governments. The pirates always fought against the British or the Americans or the Spanish or the French. They were outlaws and cutthroats. That's the way they were described in all of the history books and all of the great movies about them. However, these men who sailed the seven seas that took loot from ships around the world, buried that loot on islands that people are still looking for even today. Some of these great treasures have never been found yet, and there are treasure hunters still hunting those things. Hollywood glorified these people. Hollywood glorified them, but these cutthroats, these outlaws from the law, these men, brave, bold, and brassy, were all called pirates. Pirates of the early American era were not considered heroes at all. They were, like I said, they was cutthroats. But we honor them today in today's media. We honor them in the movies. We honor them with theme parks. You got places like Treasure Island named after them. You got Pirate of the Caribbean with uh, uh, different movie stars playing these pirates. You know, you've seen Captain Hook in Walt Disney. You've seen Blackbeard. You've seen Captain Morgan. They got rum named after these pirates. I can go on and on and on about how media and contemporary art has turned these men into, the rogue, every woman wants man. But these guys were not always looking just like what you saw in the movies and in the cartoons and on the Disney channels. And when you go to Treasure Island, you see these pirates. Most of these men were black men, although a lot of the captains of the ships were white. The fact that black men played a big role in the history of pirates in the Caribbean during the golden age of piracy. They even had an age for it called the Golden Age. And this golden age was from the late 1600s to the early 1700s. Now, why would black men from the 1600s, 1700s want to become pirates? Well, let's put on our thinking caps. 1600s, black men were being shipped from Africa as slaves. 1700s, black men were shipped from Africa as being slaves. So that's a 100-year period of black men being shipped from Africa as slaves. However, these black men escaped slavery by joining pirate groups. They were looking for freedom and opportunity, and they joined the crews of pirates. They escaped from slavery. Most of them were runaway slaves. Some of them was actually men aboard slave ships when pirates attacked the slave ship for their loot. They freed these men and gave them the opportunity to join with them instead of being a slave on somebody's plantation working from sunup to sundown. While many faced discriminations and were assigned dirty jobs on these ships, because let's remember now, a lot of these pirates who owned these ships, they were still white men. And we were still in the time period of they looked at black men as inferior. So many of even though they gave them freedom on their ships, they were still working and they were still doing a lot of the dirty jobs aboard the ship. But now, that's not true of every pirate ship. Some pirate ships treated them as equals, granting them the right to vote, to carry guns, and they also shared the loot with them after they raided other ships. Now, I'm sure most of you have watched pirate movies, and the pirates always attacked another ship. And when they attacked the ship, they raided, took control, and stole all of the goods that their ship had. And they divided this stuff equally amongst the men. Actually, the pirate ship had the first actual unions. These men was all in a union, and they all shared in the loot and the bounty of what they stole from other ships. But you wouldn't know that if you watch Pirates of the Caribbean. Although I've seen that movie with Jack, can't think of his last name, with the actor, they do have one or two black pirates in that movie every once in a while. But anyway, let's talk about one of the famous pirates that's black that you have never probably heard of. The most famous of the black pirates was a man called Caesar. He was known as Black Caesar. He was a pirate from West Africa who operated during the golden age of the piracy. He served aboard the Queen Anne's Revenge. That's the name of a ship, Queen Anne's Revenge. The pirate Blackbeard. You ever heard of Blackbeard? Famous pirate. Blackbeard. This was Blackbeard's, he was on his ship. Now, this guy was a pirate long before he met Blackbeard. Myths surrounding his life that he was an African of African royalty and terrorized the Florida Keys for years before joining Blackbeard have been intermixed with legends and fictional accounts, well as with other pirates. Now, I'll tell you an account. Caesar and his men were on the coast of West Africa, and they always seemed to escape slave catchers. Slave catchers was always trying to get them because they were fighters. They were warriors. They were not just men in Africa waiting to be captured. They were warriors. So they always fought slave captures away from them. However, one day a British slave ship hunter tricked Caesar and his men to come aboard his ship. He promised them good food, trinkets, and what have you. Well, these men came aboard his ship. And while they were in the galley eating lunch and admiring some of the trinkets that the white men had, the ship pulled the anchor and slowly sailed off into the Atlantic Ocean. By the time Caesar and his men realized that they were captured, it was too late. They was deep at sea. So these guys fought for a while, and then they finally realized, well, we might as well give in. They gave in. But on their way to the Caribbean, and by the time they was off the coast of Florida, a hurricane hit the ship. And there was one one sailor aboard this white man's ship that befriended Caesar. And he came to the galley where he was at, all chained up, and told him, this ship is going to flounder. It's a hurricane coming. I'm going to take your chains off of your feet and off your hands. So if we sink, we can get away. That's exactly what he did. And the hurricane hit the ship, and the ship sank, and Caesar and his friend And you know, it never says if his friend, the guy that took the chains off of him, was a black sailor or a white sailor. It just said that it was a sailor. Anyway, they managed to commandeer a boat from the ship while the ship was sinking, and they managed to fight the waves and the turbulent seas and the hurricane and the lightning and thunder, and they ended up in the Florida Keys. When they got in the Florida Keys, they set up shop. And every ship that passed the Florida Keys, they would go out in their boat, fake like they were sailors in distress. And when the ship would come to rescue them, they would take over the ship. And they did this to the point where eventually he became known as a big, bold pirate. Now, eventually he got hooked up with Blackbeard. And Blackbeard was notorious pirate. He destroyed many a ship that was coming from Europe, coming into the Caribbean. Blackbeard also had a ship that was 60% of his pirates, 60%. Now just listen to this. 60% of Blackbeard's pirates were black. I've seen plenty of movies about Blackbeard the pirate, and they never have the majority of his pirates being black men. As a matter of fact, they don't even have any black men on the ship. But in reality, 50% of his pirates were black. Now, whites didn't really have a moral compass against slavery, and some of them were actually slave traders themselves who turned into pirates. However, many captains were known to focus on raiding slave ships, freeing slaves, and offering them to join their crew. Some captains would make them do the worst jobs and treat them as part of their property, while others accepted them as free men like the rest and could even rise in ranks among the crew. All in all, pirate ships became free havens for black men and a job that could actually let them gain power and money. Besides that, for pirates, having black men join their crew represented strong men willing to take revenge against colonial ships. Because see, if you rescue a bunch of black men that was taking slaves, and you tell them, okay, we're gonna attack all them ships full of them white folks who've been robbing y'all villages back home in Africa, guess what? I'm in. I'm in. I'm ready to bust a couple of heads. And actually, they did more than bust heads. They actually took these people out. Again, this wasn't a moral matter for their crew, but the ships were also loaded with all sorts of material goods. But all in all, the main treasure was ships themselves. These were the fastest ships, the more importantly, they were extremely big, perfect for big pirate crews. Having bigger and faster ships allowed pirates to raid any ship they encountered. Now, it's a fact that when the golden age of pirates went into decline, they started to decrease. They went into decline, and that was like in the 1700s. And the numbers of slaves started to decrease because slaves that they was capturing Africans, bringing to America, they kept being freed by pirates. Pirates kept attacking those ships. Because now remember now, I'm only talking about men, but there were also women on these ships. And these pirates had all these hidden islands. Most don't realize that the Florida Keys and the Caribbean islands, many places in the Florida Keys and the Caribbean islands, Bahamas, Jamaica, Bermuda, all those places were not very well populated by white folks at that time. And there were plenty of hiding places for these men to set up bases. So they would capture slave women, they would capture white women, they would capture whatever woman that was on any ship coming from Europe, and they would take these women to these islands, And these men would live on these islands, and these women would become these men women. Okay, so once you got captured, it was just too late. It wasn't like in the movies where some Errol Flynn gonna come flying down a rope with a sword and rescue you. You were not gonna get rescued. You're gonna relive the rest of your life as a wife of some pirate, a woman of some pirate on some Caribbean island. As a matter of fact, the Black Caesar had a harem of more than 100 women himself on his island in the Florida Keys. Now, when the piracy began to go in decline, just think about this. Slavery began to increase again. Okay, because now the pirates they're being hunted by the English, they're being hunted by the French, they're being hunted by the Spanish, they're being hunted down. And once they sank the pirate ships, captured the men, they killed the white men because they were pirates. They hung them. And the black slaves or the black pirates that they captured, they put them back into slavery. So slavery began to increase again because now they were able to catch these men. Anyway, these colonial countries had a hard time because they could not stop these pirates for over 100 years of stealing loot, stealing slaves, stealing whatever they could get. Most black pirates were former slaves anyway. They had been freed by these pirates and they escaped their fate and joined this illegal haven. It is estimated that about 1/3 of the pirate population was black and they were former slaves. Now, next time you watch a movie about pirates, you see Johnny Depp playing in the Pirates of the Caribbean. Johnny Depp would have probably, the character he's playing, probably would have been a black man. As mentioned, many pirate crews established democratic systems in which, for the first time in the Western world, because America was very young, but for the first time in the Western world, black men, and this is important to note, okay, were able to vote, own weapons, and even have an equal share of the stolen loot. Now that's, a lot of this they don't like to tell you because they want black people to always cry in their milk about woe is me, and we never had anything. We've never been free. We was always just slaves, and we just chopped cotton and picked cotton, got our butts beat, and said "Yazza balls." But that's all fallacy. That happened to the majority of black people in the 1600s, in the 1700s, but that did not happen to all black people. But this fantasy of freedom and democracy and equality only happened on these ships. And since the pirates was considered terrorists by the powers that be, I named the countries. As soon as they started wiping these pirates out, like I said earlier, the white pirates, including Blackbeard, Redbeard, Captain Morgan, and all the rest of them, they was hung by the neck until they was dead. And after they was hung by the neck until they were dead, the vast majority of the black pirates who did not fight to the death, because think of this, in a pirate ship, we just say the British Navy, when the British Navy tried to board a pirate ship to capture the pirates, the men, the crew of the pirate ship, 9 times out of 10 fought to the death. They fought to the death. And if anybody were taken alive and they happened to be black, they were sold on the auction block back into slavery. If they were white, they were hung by the neck until they was dead because they considered the white men as just terrorists. So now let's analyze this. Would you rather be sold back into slavery or hung by the neck until you was dead? The white men got hung. the black men lives were spared, but they was back into slavery. But that did not happen to each and every one of them, because the pirate known as Black Caesar, okay, he was taken prisoner. He didn't fight to the death. He was taken prisoner by Virginia colonial authorities. He was tried for piracy, but he was acquitted. Now think of this. He had killed many a men, kidnapped many a women, stole many goods, but he was acquitted. And after his release, he survived and worked as a barrel maker, not as a slave, but as a free man, and he lived into his 70s. Now, that guy could sit and tell you a lot of stories when he was alive. The Black Caesar. Black Caesar, there was three notable black pirates, and I'm going to name a couple more of these guys. I already said that Black Caesar was the most famous of all of them because he was a pirate on his own before he joined up with Blackbeard. He had his own ship, he had his own crew, and he took over ships whenever he felt like it that came around the Florida Keys. He was known for raiding ships on the shores of the Florida Keys. He eventually joined Blackbeard's crew aboard the Queen Anne's Revenge and managed to become the crew's lieutenant. He became the lieutenant of Blackbeard. Now, before becoming a notable pirate, like I had said earlier, he had been captured through trickery. He was a brave man, but since he had no other way to get back to Africa, because even though you became a pirate, sailing to Africa, you need to know something about navigation. He wasn't a sailor, he was just a warrior who turned into a sailor. He became one of the most fearsome pirates in the Caribbean until he was captured and went on to become a barrel maker. Now, here's another pirate, black pirate. His name is Henry Caesar. For some reason, white people love to name black folks after characters from the Greek tragedies or the Roman legions. You know, you got somebody named Caesar and Nicodemus and all this type of stuff. But anyway, this pirate was named Henry Caesar. And sometimes they mistook him for the Black Caesar, but he wasn't the Black Caesar. For some, they gave him the same name. He was from Haiti. He was a Haiti pirate. He made his name and his fortune raiding European ships. However, for Haiti, it all would change when the Haitian Revolution started. When they had the Haitian Revolution, well, he decided to stop being a pirate and go help his people in Haiti fight the French. And that's how his reign of terror ended. He went to help Dessalines and to help Toussaint Louverture overthrow Napoleon. And they did it. Haiti was a big time revolutionary country at one time. It wasn't like it is now, it was much different. This guy was named Lorenz de Goff, another pirate, black pirate. He last, but he's not least. We have the infamous Dutch pirate. He was Dutch, meaning that he had been a Dutch slave. And so that's why they gave him the Dutch uh, title. Even though some of the people try to depict him as being a white man, he wasn't a white man. The pirate had a crew of over 2,000 men. Now that's a big ship, okay? Because some of our Navy vessels today don't even have 2,000 men on them. Anyway, he was of African descent, and his name, Gaff, was commonly used to refer to a mulatto people. So what that means, I know all of you know what the mulatto word means, meaning he was half black. We just give it that, he was half black. In other words, so white folks won't get mad, he was part European and part African. But according to the story, he was enslaved during his childhood by the Spanish, and he managed to escape. He devoted his life to so he can torment the Spanish vessels. He always, since they made him a slave, he always attacked the Spanish ships that was coming across the Spanish main. Because if you ever been to Jamaica, there's a section in Jamaica that you can stand on the shores of Jamaica and look out toward the ocean, look out toward the open sea from Jamaica. And they called that the Spanish Main because that was where all the Spanish ships always came in from, that direction. Anyway, he attacked so many of those Spanish ships and took over so many of those Spanish ships and sunk so many of those Spanish ships to the point that the Spanish gave him the nickname the Devil. He is the devil because he was just that mean of a pirate. The Dutch named him Laurens de Graaf. He started his career as a French privateer, and the Spanish greatly feared his crew. He had, like I said, over 2,000 men. Many accounts of his record, he was a very tall man. And they say he was a tall black man with blue eyes. Just think of that. A tall black man with blue eyes. He also was known as El Graffy, which was a common name given to men and women who had both European and African ancestry. After being enslaved by the Spanish, he grew up, got tough, got mean, got hard, and decided I'm going to take everything I can from the Spanish. And, you would say, I can see myself asking this question because I would have asked this question. Did black men ever pirate any of those pirate ships? And I just named you three of them who did. But yes, black men did indeed own and captain ships of the Golden Age. Many of them were equal to the white pirates as seafaring men. When I say seafaring men, I mean men who knew the seas, men who had sailed the seven seas, men who could navigate around those islands in the Caribbean and do the things that pirates do. Pirates did a lot of, they didn't do anything that was so respectable. And I didn't pick this subject to state that they was choir boys and angels. I picked this story just so we as African Americans will understand that every aspect of American history, black people have participated in, even the piracy. They just did. You know, they they were mariners, they was pirates, they was sailors, they was hunters, what have you. But these pirates sailed the seas, attacked European ships and American ships as well. I left that out earlier, but they attacked American ships until they became a great problem because the only way you could get from Europe to the Americas in those days, you had to come through the Atlantic into the Caribbean to either go to South America or to come to North America. And the Caribbean was right there. And those islands, for the most part, was uncharted and uninhabited except for Indians. And these people were bringing slaves there for the new colonies to help with the sugar cane and the whatever they was trying to cultivate. And these people was you heard of the Maroons? Have you ever heard of the Maroons? Most of these Maroons who were runaway slaves who jumped off ship, ran into the woods or the jungles of South America and the Caribbean. Most of these guys who became pirates were from the Maroon people who just decided, I'm not going to do this. One guy, John Mapu, led crews that were mostly white. He was a black captain, John Mapu. It was a black captain who had a ship, and his crew was mostly white. Now, these white men was cutthroats. But just think of this. These white men in the 1700s had a black captain telling them what to do. Okay? So don't think for an instance that black men have never done anything but say "Ya's a boss," because no, we've done a lot more than that. Now, are there any questions? Because I could go on and on about this, but I'm going to stop and let you guys throw some questions at me because I've been studying and reading this stuff for a while. And I got a lot of this junk floating around in my head, and I want to see if I can answer some of these questions. So the floor is open. Oh, no questions, huh?
I guess I have more of a statement than a question. The last topic you talked about was the black captain with the white crew. It had to be to their advantage. It had to be to their advantage. Whereas he was evidently very good at what he was doing, and they just joined the bandwagon.
That's probably so, because he would never become captain of a ship if he wasn't good at what he was doing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, and see,
Yeah.
a good captain, a crew is only as good as the captain of the ship. And if the captain finds the right ships to raid and to attack and get the best profits, then I'm not going to argue with him because he's black. I'm making a bundle.
Exactly.
I'm going to go along with the program.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. That's a good observation.
Yeah. Mm-mm. Well, that's something.
Okay, Captain Bly in there that looked like me. What question you got?
I'm guessing that's for me. Uh, a question that I would have would be, did America ever put any type of concerted effort with its Navy to go after any of these pirates?
Yes, they did. And the American Navy had to help the British Navy and the French Navy and the Spanish Navy eradicate the pirates because American ships, the ships that they were taking, were not naval vessels. They was taking cargo ships and pleasure ships. When people would come from Europe to come to the Caribbean or come to America, they didn't come aboard Navy ships. The pirates tried to make certain that they stay out of the view of the naval vessels. But when they did run up against these naval vessels, they fought them. They fought them to the death because it was no profit in fighting a naval vessel because all they got is cannons and guns and soldiers. They don't have gold and stuff like that to steal. But yes, the American Navy, if you want to hear about 1869, 1870, the American Navy and the British Navy and the Spanish Navy made a concerted effort and they basically wiped out the piracy of the Caribbean and the Atlantic. They didn't stop it 100%, but they made it where the seas were safe again to sail. You had pirates, but you didn't have them in abundance numbers.
So, do we have modern day pirates at all
Yes,
now?
we do.
We do.
Yes, we do. You still have modern day pirates. You have them in the Atlantic, off the coast of Africa, off the coast of South America, and even in the Caribbean today. Most of their Africans off the coast of Africa, and most of their Hispanics that are down near the Caribbean because they're from South America. And if you would move over to the Pacific, there are plenty of Asian pirates that still operate the waters and they still attack small vessels and cargo ships. They won't attack the ships that are too large because it's like it's no need for you to try to attack a ship that you can't. There's nothing you can do with it. But yes, to answer your question, yes, we still have pirates.
Brother Lee, that was going to be my question also because I assume I didn't know if it was true or not. Someone had went on a cruise and they said that they were warned to turn out all of their lights in their cabins because they had pirates in the water. Is that, I mean, and I guess it's on a large cruise ship that sounds like it's really crazy, but I assume that anything is possible. Would that be something that would happen?
Yes, it's not crazy. There are still pirates, and they do attack cruise ships because they can make a killing on a cruise ship. Cruise ship don't have any security that actually got guns. Cruise ships, when you go on a cruise, you've seen the people on the cruise, the one that let you on that ship when you come to the port of embarkation. These are just guys in uniform. They don't have any weaponry. They can't. If you was to just punch him in the jaw, you can run back off the ship and he'd have to chase you down. But yes, that is they definitely do have pirates floating around in the Caribbean looking for opportunities, and they're not gonna do too much attacking on ships that they cannot board because even though you have cruise ships, they do have anti-piracy uh, programs to keep the pirates away. Like they got water hoses and flares and they got immediate access to the Coast Guard. And that's the part that keeps most of the pirates away. Because the Coast Guard will wipe them out.
Thank you.
You reckon?
I guess mine is more of a comment as well. It's very interesting as you talked because I do like the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. But as you were naming some of those names, it's very interesting to hear. Um, I didn't at all think any of that was true to form, but just mentioning some of the names and the different parts that Black pirates played in that, it's definitely not depicted that way. So I never would have imagined what you share just based off of some of the things I've seen on television.
Oh yeah. You watch the older the movie, the more whitewashed it is. The newer versions of the pirate movies, you have black pirates in the movie. They're not the star of the movie, but they're in the backdrop. And then when in the movie that Johnny Depp played in, Jack, what's his name?
Jack Sparrow.
Jack Sparrow.
Hmm.
The Jack Sparrow character, he's constantly in the Caribbean and he's constantly surrounded by black people. And actually, Jack Sparrow is a compilation of black pirates, white pirates, Hispanic pirates. They put them all together in one to make him kind of depict what the pirates used to be. And the stuff that you see in those Jack Sparrow movies, other than the mythical, you know, people walking on the water and all that old type of crap, they did those things. They raided other ships. They played loosey goosey with the ladies of the ships. They did all those things. That's just the way it was. It was totally a man's world, and they did what they wanted to do until they was captured, killed, hung, or eradicated. And it put it from this angle, looking at it from the 21st century, looking back, it looks like it was an adventurous life, something that a young man would love to do. But it was a very dangerous life because your life wasn't worth a plug nickel. All it took is one cut from a sword, and that's the end of you. But the thing that I found interesting about it was the opportunity of black men in the Western Hemisphere to get freedom and power and be their own masters in the 1600s. Because I know you all here, 1619, black folks were slaves and they did this to us and they did that to us and they did this to. Yes, they did do those things. and they were bad, horrific, and terrible. But African Americans need to stop just harping on the negative things. Look at some of the things that Black people did that were positive. Even though these guys were cutthroats, even though these guys were murderers, even though these guys were rapists and they were considered criminals, the Black men that were doing this were free. And they were able to remember the ships that they was taking wasn't being sailed by Black people. The ship that they was taking was being sailed by the British, the Americans, the Spanish, the French, and the Dutch. And the British, the Spanish, the French, and the Dutch look the same way today as they looked in 1600. So these guys, in other words, what I'm trying to say is they was fighting back the only way they knew how. You know, we don't want to make it too romantic. The movies make it very romantic, but in reality, it was an unromantic existence, except unless you happen to be the pirate. I mean, because once you got the power, they were just like all they really were was gangsters at sea. They were just gangsters at sea. They were the first Sopranos. They had the Godfather on boats. They did what they wanted to do until they couldn't do it anymore. But I found that interesting to realize, and which I've known for quite a while because a pastor was saying he was in the Caribbean and he saw some history about it, and so was I. I was in the Caribbean and I they had a group of pirate ships stuck in the harbor, old pirate ships. I think it was Ocho Rios, Jamaica, and they had a bunch of old pirate ships stuck out there in the harbor. And then they had, I had the history tablets telling you about the history of these Jamaican pirates. And so, yeah, I've known about them for a while, but I never really did a lot of research on them because I really wasn't that interested in the pirates simply because of their barbarism and cutthroatness. But I thought you guys would find it interesting to know that when you sit down at home, look at TCM or one of the old channels and look at one of those pirate movies, or you go to the show and look at Jack Sparrow, you will know that most of those people that you're looking at that they got white on there were not white at all. They were Black men. And they were doing what Black men have done. And my whole point is to bring to us that every history in this country, in this continent, in the Western Hemisphere, Black people have been a part of, whether it was good, bad, or indifferent. We've been a part of it. Black people are not saints no more than anybody else. They're not devils no more than anybody else. They will do good things and they will do bad things. And if it's a way to survive, trust me, you're going to do whatever you have to. Are there any other questions?
I don't have a question, Lee, but I was just listening to the presentation. I had never heard this before. And when you mentioned gangsters, I was straight on my mind as you were describing them. I said, oh, these were nothing but some gangsters. The gang started way back then. So
they were gangsters, yes.
I thank you for that knowledge.
Oh, you're welcome. They were gangsters. They were much more dangerous than the gangsters you have today. But they were gangsters, no doubt about it.
I was thinking the same thing, Ms. Roz. Mr. Robinson, another wonderful lesson. Definitely appreciate you for the time that you spent studying and preparing for this. And it's always very insightful to hear more and more just about our history. And I appreciate you for not just sharing the good, but like you mentioned, also the bad and the indifferent too. I think it is very important for us to understand what parts we played in history. So
Oh
thank
yeah, we were in it, and I want us to know. I want you guys to know, so you can tell your children and your grandchildren whenever the subject of Black history come about, you have stuff to tell them other than we walked in the civil rights marches, we were slaves, because that's basically the history. And when we had Dr. King, Jesse Jackson, and Ralph Abernathy, we have Philip A. Randolph. We walked in the civil rights marches. We were slaves, and they whooped our butts, and they hung a few of us, and we overcame. No, it's
Mhm.
much more to us than that.
Right.
And speaking of, since we near the end, I am going to for next month. I'll send it to you, the date and time and all that good stuff. But just so you can start thinking about it, I am going to revisit the Black American Cowboy.
Okay.
you. Okay.
That's what we're going to revisit. We're going to revisit the Black American Cowboy. There's more to our cowboys than the good guys. We also had some bad guys.
We on the bad boy trick now.
Oh yeah, we're on the bad. Yeah, we're on the bad. Yeah, we want to tell it all. We don't want you to run around thinking that everything we did we was goody two shoes. Cause no, it wasn't. We wasn't
Yeah.
all goody two shoes. We had some bad boys too.
And
So
I
I'm
just
gonna
want
look
to,
up the bad guys. It's gonna be a compilation of the bad guys, the
okay,
Cowboys, but the bad guys of the Cowboys,
Nice.
okay.
not not the good guys. They're gonna be the one that wore the black hats, not the ones that wear the white hats.